We're gonna go up on live.
Okay.
We're gonna live stream. It's loading now.
Nothing like technology in your hand.
IT taught us how to do this, so I think we're gonna go up on live. Whoop. All right, I think we're working now. So whenever you're ready to begin.
We're good to go. Well, now let's call the meeting to order. And if Councilman Shahid, if you'd be kind enough to bring a few words, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And of course, our attention with the city is focused on our dear Chief Luther Reynolds. We take a moment of silence so that he knows that we are with him in spirit and in love, and that this journey that he is traveling, he's not doing it alone. If we could just take a few moments to reflect on that, I think it'd be appropriate.
Thank you, Council.
And we ask that the God Almighty protect his family, give them strength and patience and everlasting peace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Council. Entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Probably moving second. And any question on those minutes? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Mr. O'Brien, well, you sure got a lot of
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to report we're the most irrigated city in the state of South Carolina.
there's another category of city, Charleston, #1.
Yes, sir. We're number one, but we had a rash of irrigations, as the committee can see, and all have been inspected, and they've received their instructions to make sure that they're maintained and do not cause an issue in the right of way. So we're just passing out all this information to the committee.
All right, great. Except there's information. There's a item that's been added to our agenda, and I'm hopeful that our committee would advance the Bearsford Creek item if we
Mr.
can.
Chairman, can we just
that.
move to take up item I, miscellaneous, in advance of the reports from the various
Thank you, Councilman. Do we have a
Thank
second?
you.
Second.
Probably moved in second. Any question on that? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, Councilman. Now, something we all been waiting for, Bearsford Creek. Who's going to address that?
I'll start off, Mr. Chairman. With
Thank you,
great
Mr.
joy, we bring two requests to the committee tonight. The first one is change order number 2 to the city's agreement with JMT, Johnson, Merriam, and Thompson to provide construction engineering and inspection services for the construction of the Bearsford Creek Bridge. That is the first contract. We had that reviewed, and we asked this. We're still doing some review internally with help from our outstanding legal department, but we're asking approval to make this contract where once everything has been, the documents have been approved by BFRC and Corporation Council, then therefore give the mayor, authorize him to sign that contract.
All right, great. It's properly moved in second. Any discussion on that? Now, Madam Clerk, I can't see everybody's hand, so I'll need your assistance.
Councilmember Gregg has his hand up.
How about that? Councilman Gregg has asked a question on that. Councilman Gregg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. While I'm not a member of this committee, I do appreciate you recognizing me. I did want to say thank you to city staff and a lot of folks here. You know, the reason we were trying to get this project moving as quickly as we are is because this bridge is going to have to be totally torn down. And there's a significant amount of school traffic, both from folks coming on to Daniel Island and folks going up to Philip Simmons schools on Clements Ferry Road during the summer. And so as much of construction as we can get done during the summer makes it a little bit less problematic for the folks at Daniel Island. So I just wanted to thank Mr. Mayor, Mr. O'Brien, all the folks in purchasing, certainly our legal counsel, as well as the clerk for getting all this wrapped up and on the agenda last week. I know it was a lot of trouble, but thank you very much, as well as folks at JMT Mark Smith for helping us get the permitting done. So Mr. O'Brien noted at one point that it felt like we could build the Cooper River Bridge faster than we built this thing, and I gotta say, I think he's right. So I don't know, the difference between building a 100-foot bridge and a 10,000-foot bridge doesn't seem to be that big of a difference. So this is, but really happy to get this project going. I think it's important for the folks on Daniel Island, and we certainly need it so we can get, so we have the ability to get garbage trucks and fire trucks over the bridge now.
Well, Councilman, thank you thanked everybody else, but we want to thank you for your role too. It's always good, as I say, to have an engineer on council, and certainly your knowledge of the approval process and the urgency certainly came forward. Mr. Mayor, do you have anything you'd like to add to this?
I'd like to thank Member Greg, because he kind of kept the fire up going behind us all to make sure we got this done. So, but it was the right thing to do, of course, and you're right in many ways. I mean, the permitting process, procurement of infrastructure project, even though it might be smaller in scope, still has to go through all those hoops. And then as we found out, the utilities, having utility companies involved and having to do relocation, it just adds all this strata of steps to jump through. If there was federal funding involved on this, Lord knows when we'd be getting this thing done. I'm almost pleased we don't have any federal funding on this one, so we can move it forward. But yeah, finally, let's get this thing done. The number came in at a good number, y'all.
I heard that. Yeah.
So we're thankful to the contractor, Cape Romaine Contractors, and we do have to get those utilities still moved, but to have this contract in place so we can give them the go-ahead, it's going to save time, and
Leave the door open.
it's all good. Thank you.
All right. All right. Now you spoke about funding. Let's get Ms. Wharton on here. Ms. Wharton, can you tell us where the dots are and the T's are crossed properly?
Okay, so we have general fund reserves set aside for this project and have had for quite a long time now. It's not fully funded right now because we are waiting for the contract to come in and had planned to come back. And if you remember last June, we had talked about adding additional ARPA funding to this project once we knew what the total cost would be. So this all kind of moved a little bit fast. We had intended to talk to ad hoc next week about the allocation of the rest of the ARPA funding and then bring that in June to council for approval. So with this contract, we just are asking that we also approve 1.55 million in ARPA funding to fully fund the project.
Okay.
In June will come with the allocation, but just with the understanding that council's already approved the 1.55.
Oh, that's great. So you're confident the funding is there in place, right?
Yes.
Good.
We have almost we have a little over $2 million already set aside in general fund. We just need the additional ARPA, which we've been talking about that for almost a year now.
Right. That's right.
If we just tomorrow night that we're approving with this contract, we're approving the 1.55 in ARPA funding, and then we'll bring the full allocation of ARPA funding in June.
That sounds great.
Okay.
Sounds great. I mean, seriously, we don't want to undermine what you do. It is so important. It's amazing how you keep up with all the pockets that we have.
And council members Seekings followed by Shade had their hands up.
All right, great. Councilman, thank you for advancing this on the agenda. Councilman Seekings.
Just very briefly, because I think Ms. Wharton actually answered my question, but as we make this motion, and I know that we don't allocate funding, but it seems to me that we should make a motion, move this forward out of Public Works with a recommendation that we add the ARPA funding to it so that we can put it in line for City Council to approve based on this committee's recommendation.
That sounds great. It was your motion. So you willing to amend your motion?
Yeah, absolutely. So moved.
And I think Councilman Shade seconded your motion.
And I'll second the amended motion.
All right, great. Councilman, great answer. Councilman Shade, you had some comments?
I did, and I just want to tip my hat off to Councilmember Greg on this. I mean, he's a newbie member of council, and there were his predecessors were engaged in this process as well. But it was just, we commented about this a little bit earlier, but a bridge that is so short in distance has so many moving parts to it, with the utility parts in particular, coordinating all of this with the different government agencies. And there are a lot of people that he has rattled off to thank. I just want to tell him job well done. He stuck with it. He was getting a lot of pressure. And I know the people in his district appreciate all that he did with this. But it's just a job well done. And this is what you have to do on council. You know, you just have to keep on pushing and being persistent, a little bit of a pain in the neck. Sometimes you get something of this magnitude done. It's a small bridge, but it's just a huge, important part because it carries a road that connects off of Interstate 526 onto Daniel Island, onto Bishop England High School. And he mentioned, of course, the utility vehicles, police, fire, trash and pickup, but just the ordinary cars that go over that bridge on a regular basis. So we're all pleased. We all are just so relieved that we got to this point. And I told him if he needed me to, I'll go there with a jackhammer and a sledgehammer, and we'll help him tear that sucker down and get cracking on it. So my offer still stands, Councilmember Gregg.
Well, listen, thank you for your comments, but I tell you what, he may be a rookie, but all of us learned on this one as well. Because I know that years ago, if you said the city build bridges, we quickly pivot to the county or somebody else. But now we can answer that in the affirmative too. Any last hands up there before we call the question?
Mr. Chairman, Tom has his hand up and Amy.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, two things very quick. I would like to also add my thanks to Councilmember Gregg. He's been a big help to us in pulling some people together. Sometimes it takes a little political clout to get people to the table, and he's been a great help to us in doing that. And I really appreciate that very much. The other thing is, I just as a point of order, I want to make sure we do have two separate contracts here, and we've talked about the first one, but to make sure that we take action on both of them so we move those forward for tomorrow night. That was the other thing.
My motion would include both, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
That's my second as well, Mr. Chairman, for both I-1 and 2.
All right, Ms. Wharton, final comment?
I just wanted to, Councilmember Seekins, you mentioned about it being for city council, but we'll need to talk about this in Ways and Means too. Make sure
Ways and Means, right. I thank you. I got it.
And I get the feeling that your motion included Ways and Means in that second also.
Yes, sir. Right? Yes, sir.
All right, call for the question. All in favor, would you please say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we're down to stormwater management update. Mr. O'Brien, where we are?
Mr. Chairman, we have our environmental services update. And before I turn it over to Matt, I'd like to take a moment to introduce to the committee our new superintendent of environmental services and streets and sidewalks, Mr. Brandon Sott, who comes to us from our safety management department here in the city. As we were doing some interviews, Brandon applied for the job, and he's been very instrumental in doing a lot of our training for our drivers. And we're proud to say has dropped our accident rate a great number up there. And he applied for this job and has been with us since May 15th. And we're very happy to have him on board. And I just want to take a moment to introduce him to the committee. And he'll be assisting Matt in his duties as the deputy director up there to continue the service that we've been getting to keep those phone calls that you guys and ladies get for garbage and trash to a minimum. I just want to take a minute to introduce Brandon.
Do we have his mobile phone number?
Yeah.
We'll get that to you. Yes, sir.
Well, Brandon, welcome, Brandon. I can tell you, you got open arms. Let me tell you, a lot of people glad that you're on board. So thank you, Mr. O'Brien, for recognizing Brandon so we all can, as Councilman Jade said, get his cell number. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Good to see you. Now do we go on to the stormwater management update? Mr. O'Brien?
Matt's going to give a brief report. Let Matt give a brief report, then we'll be ready to turn it over to Mr. Fountain.
All right, good.
All right, garbage, trash, everything was on time last week, it's running on time this week. We don't foresee any issues. Next week's holiday on Monday, everything will be on a 1-day delay, including the contracted areas of Daniel Island and King Hoy, Outer West Ashland and Johns Island. So everything will be on a 1-day delay next week. We will be bringing a letter of intent to you guys for June for 3 knuckle booms for you guys' approval for 2024. That's all I have.
Let me tell you, we're waiting on those knuckle booms. We're talking about that since the last meeting, not stormwater, but even on the floor of council. Knuckle booms. So again, thank you for keeping us on track, because when y'all don't, believe me, we all hear it and you all do too. So thanks so much for being on time. Now, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so King Street, Hughes Street, there's a question about a $10 million grant. Do you wonder if we will or won't accept?
That's right, Mr. Chairman. This is a question for a recommendation for Ways and Means on whether we are interested in accepting the $10 million grant from SERIA. Yep, and I'm sharing my screen. You can't tell, Mr. Chairman, with the malfunctions, but just as a reminder, the King UG drainage project, on the right are pictures of that intersection flooding in almost every major rain event that we encounter as a city. Phase 1 of this project was previously constructed in 2022. Phase 2 is what we are looking at the grant award for, which is the construction of the pump station. You can see some renderings on the left. That's currently scheduled to go to bid in late 2023 as we're finishing up permitting at this point. This is the SCRIA, the South Carolina Rural Infrastructure Agency, handing out the ARPA funding awards for the major infrastructure improvements in the state. They had a total of about 1.4 billion that they were allocating out through water, wastewater, and stormwater. The maximum award any entity could receive was for a $10 million award. So that is what we did receive for King UG, and we're looking again for a recommendation to accept that award.
Is there a motion amongst this committee to accept that?
So moved. So moved.
Properly moved, and who seconded it?
Second.
Okay, Councilman Bowden. Thank you, Councilman Bowden. Any questions? All in favor, please say.
I have one question, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Councilman Shade.
Yeah. So Matt, thank you for the visual on here. Where is this going to be? This pump station physically going to be located?
Yeah. So Councilman Shade, you can kind of see this picture looking down at the base of this screen. That would be UG Street, and then behind the pump station here are the homes and Enston homes. So this is basically sitting in the empty green space right at the front of Enston Homes on the north side of UG Street. We have an agreement with the Housing Authority where they've given us a gratis drainage easement to place that system there.
So this would be across the street from Sacred Heart Church?
Yes, that's correct.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. I was looking at those point of references. I just wanted to make sure I got that accurate. Thanks for clarifying that for me.
Absolutely.
Is there any way, Mr. Fountain, that you can send an email of this to Councilman former Councilman James Lewis? Because this is one that I know, Mr. Mayor, you remember this, and a lot of us, man, he worked hard on complaining and bringing this to light, as well as Councilmember Mitchell, because Councilmember Mitchell will see it tomorrow night. So, but anyway, any more comments? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Well, Mr. Mayor, did you want to address that? Because that's a pretty big grant. Hello? Anyway, let's go to the next one. Item 2, the HUD CDBG grant, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the HUD CDBG MIT grant. This is the same grant funding entity that is currently funding the Earhart Medical District project, the Medical District Dental Extension project.
Right.
This is their last round of applications for this original pot of funding. The MIT stands for mitigation. So this is when they receive money after a disaster to basically build mitigation projects. So we're recommending that we apply for the Cooper Jackson Drainage Improvement Project. This would be a $5 million application. The Cooper Jackson area is basically the Upper East Side of Charleston.
Right.
I have a couple photos again showing some existing flooding. The flooding here tends to focus around kind of Cooper, Aiken, America Street, but certainly spreads throughout the rest of the basin. The lower left corner is kind of a heat map showing the pre-flooding in a 10-year storm. Again, with green being flooding that's typically over 2 feet deep. And then the right map is showing flooding roughly 7 hours after the peak of a storm, basically showing that we can get it to drain out. The far right is showing what improvements we'd be looking at. These are generally pipe upsizing improvements in this neighborhood. I will note that this is an area that is very, very low. So what we are planning to build are projects to improve conveyance out. These projects will struggle in an extreme tide event without pump support. So we are looking at what it would take to either supercharge this with a pump station or to incorporate this if the Army Corps of Engineers comes in and does barrier wall or pump stations. But this initial project is for gravity drainage at this point to meet the cost benefit thresholds.
When you say pump upsizing, can you give an example from
Yeah,
what?
so if the Army Corps of Engineers were to do a barrier wall project, they would need to put in pumps in order to drain the water that basically the wall would block from flowing overland and out into the harbor.
Right.
There's an option in there to do basically like a local preference or a local enhancement to the project where you ask that pump station to be built larger to be able to handle the underground stormwater system as well. It's always much cheaper to increase the size of something than it is to build it from scratch. So it's a good way to leverage two projects together if that project were to move forward. We're also looking at what it would be if that project doesn't move forward to build our own pump station, potentially, and what the cost and benefit would be in the area for that.
Okay, great.
This should provide some significant drainage improvements and flood relief. I mean, right now, that, as we all know, that water sits for, again, days after a major storm event. This would help it drain out very quickly in the next low tide cycle.
All right. Do we have a motion on this from the committee? Properly moved, and we got a second.
Second.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Fountain. Spring Fishburne?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stop the share on this one. I don't have a graphic for this, but this is approval of Spring Fishburne Drainage Improvement Phase 5. It's not the 26 fee amendment for Phase 5, but for the overall Spring Fishburne contract for professional services with Davis and Floyd. This is an increase due to some additional costs we had in design work, in that the pump station has moved since the original design of this facility into a velocity zone from just a normal AE flood zone. So we had to redesign some of the building elements to handle wave action. And we've added in some funds for coordination of the pumps that we procured, basically coordinating that work with the manufacturer of the pumps. We're in a construction contract. Typically that would be an obligation for the construction contractor. And then we've added in design and construction drawing work for fencing and landscaping that DOT has basically signed off on after the initial concept work for this phase. So that obviously increases our overall professional service task and lets us put in this additional money to a time and expense task to cover the still to come expenses of bidding the project and going through bid phase support.
All right. Councilman Seekins, do you have a motion on this?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moving second. Any discussion on this? Hearing none or seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Shoreham Drive, Mr. Fountain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to share my screen one more time for this one. Just have two very brief graphics for two projects we've completed recently, which is always nice to see these small projects come through and be completed. So this is a retrofit project in the Shoreham Willow Walk. It's on Shoreham Road in Willow Walk community. This is one of the properties where we acquired a single home in this situation with the FEMA grant, demolished the home. In the upper left corner, you can kind of see the typical flooding in the Shoreham area, again, during major events in this situation. The lot is in the middle, the empty lot, and the condition it was in after we had demolished the home. There's also a rear yard drainage system that runs behind. You can see the fencing in these pictures that runs behind the fencing in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
We've always had challenges maintaining that system because there's not access to it anywhere. There really aren't good access easements. So we took the opportunity to take this buyout lot, convert it into an access driveway to get to the rear yard drainage system. We rehabilitated the rear yard drainage system, which you can see in the bottom right picture, what it looks like rehabilitated. Basically cleared out all the vegetation, redug the accumulated sediment, directed it down. This lets it store water and convey water, and then came back through the lot. And this is a very small property in comparison to some of our projects. We're a little bit less than a quarter acre. So we basically used our field operations crews to grade down the area to store about a foot of water across the property, and then came back with a landscaping contractor and added in the geogrid reinforcement for that permanent access driveway for our field operations crews, and then replanted it in a pretty aesthetic planting style that can handle wet weather, basically handle their feet being wet. So that project's complete. We're looking at extending the ditch rehabilitation to the next round of homes upstream based on the success of the lower area, and that's our kind of our next small project in this neighborhood.
That's great, Mr. Fountain. That I guess restoration of the lot, was that some of the Dutch dialogue thinking in that?
It is, that's right, Mr. Chairman. So typically you buy these lots and then they sort of sit as kind of overgrown vacant grass lots, and people tend to start, parking cars in them or using them for things that perhaps are not very aesthetic for the neighborhood. It's just kind of an empty, abandoned green space. The Dutch dialogue sort of talked about, well, what else can you do? Well, how can you leverage something you've acquired and spend quite a bit of money acquiring to then do more for the neighborhood? So we're looking at storing some water, not as much water on this parcel as some of our larger areas, because there's just not as much space, but creating some water storage, creating an access pathway for our own drainage systems, which is a big leverage benefit for us to be able to get equipment back there, and then planting it to make it aesthetically nice for the neighborhood as well.
That's great work.
Which also makes it much lower maintenance for the city in the long run, because it should only need about twice a year maintenance instead of, weekly maintenance for grass cutting in the summers.
That's great. Do we have a motion for approval on this? Probably moved second. I think.
I'll second. I think this is just an update. I'm not sure that action needed to be taken on it.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this is not
that's true, Mr. Chairman. It's just an update for the committee on the conclusion of the project.
All right, great. Any comments from anybody else on the committee? Please let me know. Thank you, Mr. Fountain. Savannah Highway Sidewalk Project.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the other small project that we're providing the update on. This is an area in West Ashley, across from the Catholic Church on Savannah Highway. It's between Nicholson and Campbell, kind of just before you get into the commercial center of Avondale there as you're coming from downtown. On the south side of the road, the sidewalk dips down, as you can see in some of the pictures, quite a bit below Savannah Highway.
Right.
Drainage from the highway to some extent runs down, but so does drainage from all of these lots and accumulates in the sidewalk. There's a number of very beautiful, very large oak trees in this area that lift the sidewalk up and create these, you can see in the bottom right picture, these areas where water will just pond for days and be unable to get to the great inlet that is, you can see in the sidewalk. On the left, you can see what also happens is because the road is so much higher than the sidewalk and it gets wet, all that debris accumulates and gets pushed down into the sidewalk and kind of makes a muddy mess out of the sidewalk very regularly. So it's been a challenge for pedestrian traffic, and obviously with Avondale right here, this is an area that sees a lot of pedestrian throughput. So we came in with a project to try to remove that flooded water, which should help stabilize the berm and prevent sort of the slow erosion of Savannah Highway down into the drainage system. So this is the kind of the precondition here in this photo. As we move down to construction project, the upper left here, basically we tore up sections of the sidewalk, not the entire sidewalk, added in under drain, added in some inlets. tearing up the entire sidewalk, one is very expensive to relay grade for the sidewalk. And then two, because those trees are still there, they're going to continue to do the same thing and push the sidewalk sections up and break up the drainage. So what we're looking to do instead is figure out ways to help the water get under those uplifted sections without damaging the trees, which is why the under drain approach, which is very unusual for a sidewalk or a city drainage project, but we think shows some real potential for benefit. So on the right and the bottom are kind of what it looks like afterwards. Now it just looks like a wide open, clean sidewalk. We came in and very much smoothed out the shape of this berm in a lot of areas. You can see the sod struggling to get reestablished, but we're hoping it'll reestablish a little better as we get into this wetter, hotter season. That'll help reduce that erosion, stabilize the ground, as well as keep this sidewalk much drier during those heavy rainstorms. We've observed it during a few of these recent rainstorms, and it seems to be draining out very well. Obviously, under drains will perform at their absolute peak when they are freshly installed, so we'll keep monitoring it and seeing how they hold up. But so far, it looks like a very successful project.
Okay, great. Any comments from committee members?
Councilmember
Pell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Matt, I just want to thank you and your staff again for this project over in Burns Downs. When I was running for office back in the fall of 2019, it feels like it was a lifetime ago. I met a woman who lived along this stretch of Savannah Highway, and she had a binder of photographs, emails, calls. It was the most impressive thing I've ever seen. She had been trying to talk to anybody that would listen about this issue for the better part of a decade. And I promised her that we would do everything we could to get it addressed. And it's just so awesome to see that we've gone from there to this. And I bumped into her the other day in a walk in our neighborhood. She was thrilled about the design. She had her doubts and some skepticism about whether it would work. She's studied and looked at this stuff very intently. She knows every inch of this stretch of sidewalk, and she was just thrilled about this. And it's just really fulfilling to see, like we talked about with Councilmember Greg, that, if you're into instant success or instant results, this is the wrong business to be in. It's hard to get things done, whether it's a sidewalk or it's a small bridge or it's a big bridge. But when you can see things come to fruition, it's a very sweet and special moment. And I just didn't want to let that moment go without acknowledging both the constituent that brought this forward, as well as our staff that continues to amaze with projects that are small, large, and everything in between. So just wanted to say thanks to everybody.
Yeah, great work, man. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And I apologize. I missed your call. Shout out a few minutes.
Oh, that's okay.
So kind of
we'll get it tomorrow morning. tomorrow at the meeting.
Going back to number one, the $10 million grant, I got to share with y'all that we were totally committed to this intersection and addressing this, I think, centuries old issue, at least since the railroad got put in the early 1800s. But honestly, it was in two phases, and phase two, we were going to have to probably wait a couple of years for drainage funds to be able to fund this thing. So I got to tell you, getting this $10 million is like catching the Hail Mary pass. It allows the project, number one, to go forward, but number two, it allows us to fund these other projects in other parts of the city that might not have been so grant worthy, if that's a expression. But the number two item, the MIT mitigation grant funding for Cooper Jackson, of course, we're just applying for it, but we feel that that's going to rank very high on their rating when they grade this grant application. So we feel very positive about that. And that's also a project we're committed to. And so we get that $5 million. That's also money that we can spend somewhere else in the city. So that would be a total of $15 million And what two better examples than the two that we've just completed here, Shore and Willow Walk. We've had issues there for decades, along with the Savannah Highway project as well. So hats off again to Matt and all the stormwater team. Great job.
Great comments. I couldn't agree with you more. So that's just for information too. Any other comments on that from councilmen? As I said, Madam Clerk, I can't see everybody's. All right, hearing none. Now we down to miscellaneous. We got a legal issue, Ms. Copeland.
Mr. Chairman, I think those were the two items y'all took out of order earlier.
Oh, okay. I'm not used to Public Works finishing all these projects in 43 minutes. But that's good news.
I'll move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
Before we think of some other ones, before we think of some other ones. Chair entertains a motion to adjourn by acclamation. We stand adjourned, and I look forward to seeing